Two hikers encountered a rattlesnake. Then they fell in love. Manny tried not to panic. But when the snake came riding out of a bush and proceeded to unfurl and stand alert, Manny felt the fear kick in. It looked like it was kind of aggressive. It was standing up, he recalls. We were all freaking out. It was early 2019. Manny and two friends were hiking back from the bridge to nowhere, a remote structure built for an abandoned 1930s highway project in California's San Gabriel Mountains. 20-something Manny was born in Mexico but grew up in California, and he was familiar with the state's more hair-raising wildlife. But it was one thing reading about venomous rattlesnakes, and another thing coming face-to-face with one in the middle of nowhere. "I'm terrified of snakes," says Manny. And we were on this part of the trail where it's very narrow. On one side, you have a clearing with a bit of a drop and a steep fall. And then on the other side, you just have a whole bunch of bushes, so we couldn't really go around the snake. Unsure what to do, Manny and his friends just stopped, silent and wide-eyed. We were just standing there, figuring out what we could do, how to try and scare it, when another group came up behind us. Manny turned to see three women, each with a backpack strapped to them, each looking confused. The trio was familiar, one of them in particular, and Manny realized they'd all been at the bridge to nowhere together earlier that day. Under the bridge you can go and swim in these pools. There's a river running underneath, explains Manny. We had all stopped there and swam for a bit. While bathing in the pools, Manny had been struck by one of the women. She'd been sitting on a rock, laughing with her friends in between snapping photos of the view. I remember thinking, damn, that girl looks pretty cute, says Manny. But Manny didn't speak to her. And when Manny and his friends left the bridge, the women were still there. But now they'd all unexpectedly reconvened to face down a rattlesnake. Laura's perspective. While she was sitting on the rock at the bridge to nowhere, Laura Binder didn't really pay Manny Salas much notice. And later, when Laura and her friends ran into Manny and his group on the trail, she didn't recognize him right away. Laura's first thought was simply, why are those guys just standing there? Then she saw their expressions and realized something wasn't right. Be careful, said one of Manny's friends. There's a rattlesnake literally right there. He indicated in front of them, where the snake was still standing to attention. Laura gasped. She was from Vienna, Austria, where there is no dangerous wildlife to speak of. California rattlesnakes were new territory. Fortunately, Laura's two friends were a little calmer in the face of danger, and Manny and his party felt some safety in their numbers increasing. The two groups banded together to scare off the snake by stomping their feet, clapping, and shouting. Eventually, the snake slinked off into the foliage, allowing the group to continue warily along the path. In part because of the snake encounter, and in part because it was getting dark, Laura's group and Manny's group made the decision to hike the rest of the trail together. As they put some distance between themselves and the snake, the hikers started to calm down, and the two groups introduced themselves as they meandered down the trail. The path was just wide enough for the hikers to walk 2 by 2. By coincidence, Laura and Manny found themselves next to each other, and they chatted as they went. The two discussed their shared love of the outdoors, with Laura mentioning she was new to California. She'd moved there in early 2019, leaving behind her home city of Vienna, where she'd grown up with an Austrian mother and a South Korean father. Since I was a baby, we went to so many different places, and I also studied abroad in Japan and in South Korea, Laura tells CNN Travel Today. I love to travel. It was Laura's desire to see the world that prompted her to move to California, to pursue a postgraduate degree at UCLA. When Laura encountered Manny and the rattlesnake, she was still kind of new in the city. She was in a relationship, but her partner didn't live in Los Angeles. I was a little lonely, and I wanted to meet more people, Laura recalls. I think as a foreigner, it's also hard to make connections that are not just surface level. At first, Laura and Manny's conversation stayed pretty surface level. But soon they were talking about Laura's life in Vienna and Manny's experiences growing up in California. The conversation segued into rock climbing, and Manny and Laura realized they shared a favorite hobby. Manny, who was single, wondered if his connection with Laura might have romantic potential. Then Laura mentioned her boyfriend. I was like, okay, this isn't going to go anywhere romantically, that's fine. But I may have a new buddy to go with me to the climbing gym, recalls Manny. And then, at the end of the hike, when we got to the parking lot, Laura asked for my number. I felt like we were vibing, but in a friendship way, says Laura. I didn't know anyone who was a climber in LA, so it was just cool for me to meet someone who had the same hobby. The two hikers exchanged details, promising to meet up and climb together sometime. Manny and Laura kept to their word and arranged to go climbing a few weeks after the snake brought them together. Afterward, they went out to eat. One of Manny's uncles owns a restaurant in downtown LA, and he took Laura there for her first taste of real Mexican cuisine. Mexican food is not very authentic in Austria, says Laura. So it was cool that Manny could show me that. It wasn't long before the two met up again, and that's when we started having really real, deep conversations, says Manny. It wasn't something superficial. For Manny, it was during the second get-together that the reality sank in. I began to realize I think I may catch feelings if I keep going with this friendship, and that's not good because she obviously has a boyfriend, and I respect that, he says. So at the end of their second get-together, Manny was candid with Laura. I was like, hey, it's been cool hanging out with you, but the more I get to know you, the more I realize that there's potential for me to catch feelings. I respect that you are in a relationship, and I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that guy. So I think we should just not hang out anymore. It was, says Manny, a little extreme to cut off the friendship altogether, but he felt it was the right decision. I didn't see it as anything other than a friendship, says Laura. I was really devastated because I felt like we had a good connection. I'd finally made a good friend here, and he didn't want to see me anymore. After that, Manny tried to consign Laura to the past. He figured he'd never hear from her again, that soon enough she'd be back living in Europe. He deleted her number from his phone, brought back together. Several months passed. Occasionally, Laura and Manny thought about one another, both feeling a little sad about the friendship that could have been. Then, in early March 2020, Laura visited her boyfriend, who lived elsewhere in the United States, and the two called it quits. Things between them didn't feel right anymore. I came back to LA after visiting him, and then 2 days later, the lockdown happened, recalls Laura. The coronavirus pandemic had hit. Now the United States was shutting its borders. Laura had to make a decision, return to Europe or wait out the uncertainty in California. A lot of my friends were other international students, and most of them had already gone back, says Laura. I really debated about going back home because it was hard without family, and I didn't really know what's going to happen and how bad this was really going to be. But something inside me was like, no, I don't want to give up yet. I feel like I worked so hard to build something here. So Laura decided to stay in California. The first few months of pandemic life passed by, and she struggled with loneliness. I felt like I didn't have any friends in LA, no one, says Laura. And then at some point I was like, wait, what about Manny? We had such a good connection. It was late June 2020 when Laura dropped the guy she met on the hike a message. I didn't text him with the intention of, I want to get started with something, says Laura. I was just really in need of a good friend. Even though Manny had deleted Laura's number, when the message popped up, he guessed right away who it was from. He was surprised but intrigued. He wrote back right away. Then we talked a little bit, Manny recalls. I didn't ask directly, but I'm thinking maybe Laura and her boyfriend broke up. Laura soon volunteered that information, explaining she'd been single for the past few months.